Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is this expectation of precision, like engineering.
Right, like it's just a math problem or something.
Yeah, you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor points and says, well, there it is.
It is visible. It is categorized.
We like to see the problem so we can apply the solution, but then you step into the world of emotional trauma or, reputational damage, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just useless.
Completely useless. The diagnostic landscape becomes entirely murky at that point.
Right, because when someone attacks your character, there is no cast you can wear to show people you are hurting.
No, the wound is completely invisible.
And that invisible wound is what we are unpacking today on Reformed Thinking. Welcome, by the way. I'm glad you were joining us for this.
Yeah, it is a heavy topic today, but an incredibly necessary one.
It really is. Today we are taking a deep dive into Charles Spurgeon's massive commentary, The Treasury of David, and we are looking specifically at Psalm 120.
Which is such a fascinating pivot point in the Psalms.
It is. Our goal today is to examine the heavy reality of slander. We want to look at the believer's response to false accusations and the theological weight of divine justice as seen through this specific text.
We are looking at what happens when the invisible wounds of deceit meet the perfect justice of God.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to start by looking at where this text sits in the Bible, because we are moving out of some very familiar territory and into a totally different structure.
Yeah, to understand Psalm 120, you really have to look at the massive structure that comes right before it.
Psalm 119.
Right. Psalm 119 is this sprawling composition. I mean, it is the longest chapter in the Bible. It is this elaborate acrostic poem covering every single letter of the Hebrew alphabet.
Spurgeon actually describes it as a vast continent.
I love that description. When you read Psalm 119, you are walking through this massive landmass of theological reflection on the law of God. It is comprehensive.
But then you turn the page to Psalm 120 and the architecture shifts completely.
It does. We leave the continent and arrive at what Spurgeon calls the islands and islets of the Songs of Degrees.
The Songs of Degrees. So this is a collection of 15 short psalms running from 120 to 134.
Right. They are much more compact.
It is like finishing a massive multi-volume encyclopedia on the nature of God, and then suddenly you pick up a stack of vivid, highly specific postcards from a traveler on the road. The shift in tone is just jarring.
Well, the shift is jarring by design. These are also known as Pilgrim Psalms.
Right, sung by travelers going up to the house of God in Jerusalem.
Yeah, for the annual festivals. Now, some of these were likely sung in company by groups of pilgrims traveling together.
Which makes sense for a festival.
Sure. But many of them, including Psalm 120, are written in the first person singular. They were prepared for the solitary traveler.
Just one person walking the road.
Yes. And there's a historical note here that shifts how we read them. The Puritan commentator John Trapp notes that the Hebrew phrase for Song of Degrees can also refer to an eminent or excellent man.
Oh, interesting. So it is not just about physical steps or travel.
Right. In this sense, each verse functions as a short, sweet oracle. It is packed with dense meaning rather than sprawling exposition.
Wait, hold on. I need to push back on this setting for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
If I am packing my bags for a joyous religious festival in Jerusalem, singing a mournful complaint about my terrible neighbor seems entirely out of place.
It does feel a bit disconnected at first glance.
I mean, it feels like bringing a rain cloud to a wedding. You are supposed to be getting ready for a celebration of God's goodness, and instead you start the trip by singing a dirge about the people who live next door.
It seems counterintuitive on the surface. Why bring that negativity into a holy pilgrimage?
Exactly. I mean, spot on. Why do it?
Well, Samuel Cox offers a brilliant psychological perspective on this. He points out that lying lips commonly attack the absent.
The absent. Okay, explain that.
Think about the vulnerability of leaving your home in the ancient Middle East. As the pilgrim packs their bags and walks out the door, they are leaving everything. Their property, their business, their reputation.
It is all just sitting there, unguarded.
Right. And in the excitements of social intercourse, the neighbors they leave behind might easily deviate from the truth.
Oh, wow. So the moment you leave, the rumor mill starts.
The pilgrim knows that as soon as they are out of sight, they become the primary target for malicious gossip.
But wouldn't the sheer joy of the destination override that anxiety? I mean, you are heading to the temple. You are going to worship.
You would think so, but human nature is complicated.
Why give the people you left behind so much mental real estate? It feels like the psalmist is letting his detractors ruin the vacation before he even gets out of town.
Because in an ancient honor and shame culture, Your reputation was your currency.
Ah, right. It is not just hurt feelings.
No, not at all. If your reputation was destroyed while you were away, you might not have a life to return to.
That is a terrifying thought.
And Spurgeon provides another layer of historical context that makes this even heavier. The old translators summarize this psalm with a very specific heading.
David prayeth against Doeg.
Yes, Doeg the Edomite. He was a herdsman for King Saul, and his story is one of the most chilling accounts of slander in the historical books.
Right, Doeg is mentioned in 1 Samuel. But to understand the weight of this psalm, we really need to look at the mechanics of what Doeg actually did.
It is a dark story.
It really is. So David is fleeing from King Saul, who is actively trying to kill him. David is desperate, he is hungry, and he is unarmed.
He is at rock bottom.
Yeah. And he goes to the tabernacle at Nob. He asks the priest, Ahimelech, for bread and a sword.
Right, and Ahimelech, not knowing that David is a fugitive, gives him the holy bread and the sword of Goliath.
He thinks he is helping the king's top general. Ahimelech is entirely innocent here.
Yes. But Doeg was there that day. The text says he was detained before the Lord, which is a chilling phrase. He is doing his religious duty, standing in the place of worship, but his eyes are watching David and Ahimelech.
He is gathering ammunition.
Exactly. Later, when Saul is complaining that no one tells him anything, Doeg speaks up. But Doeg does not just report the facts.
He twists the narrative.
He does. He tells Saul that Ahimelech intentionally conspired with David. He frames the priest as a traitor to the crown.
Which is a complete fabrication. Ahimelech thought David was on a secret mission for the king. Ahimelech was entirely innocent of treason.
Completely innocent.
But Doeg's lie is so effective that Saul summons Ahimelech and all the priests of Nob. Saul demands their execution.
And Saul's own guards refuse to do it. They will not raise their hands against the priests of the Lord.
And Doeg steps up.
Doeg steps up and slaughters 85 priests that day.
85. It is just horrific.
And he does not stop there. He goes to the city of Nob and puts the entire city to the sword. Men, women, children, and livestock.
It was a complete massacre.
All birthed from a single twisted narrative spoken by a flatterer trying to gain favor with a paranoid king.
Spurgeon argues that this event left a permanent, agonizing mark on David's memory.
It had to. David actually says to the one surviving priest, well, he says, I knew it that day when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul.
He says, I have occasioned the death of all the persons of thy father's house.
The guilt he carried must have been crushing.
The psychological burden of that is just staggering. Knowing that someone used your actions, twisted them into a lie, and caused the death of innocent people.
It changes how you view the world.
It really does. And when you frame it that way, starting the Pilgrim Psalms with this lament makes total sense. You cannot reach the heights of theological joy without first addressing the grim reality of a fallen world.
You have to start in the mud before you can look at the stars.
I want you, the listener, to consider a time you were misrepresented. Maybe not on the scale of Doeg the Edomite, obviously.
Hopefully not.
Right. But a time when someone twisted your words or painted you in a false light. It is a very specific type of agony.
It makes you feel completely helpless.
And that transitions us perfectly into the specific anatomy of this distress. Let's focus on the first two verses.
The psalmist writes, In my distress I cried unto the Lord, and he heard me. Deliver my soul, O Lord, from lying lips and from a deceitful tongue.
So the text states that silence to man and prayer to God are the best cures.
Which goes against every natural instinct we have.
Totally. The natural human inclination is to fight back, to clear your name. But the theological instruction here is restraint.
Spurgeon points out that slander is an opponent you cannot fight. He uses this fantastic comparison.
So the cutlass analogy, I love this one.
Yeah, he says you can ward off the strokes of a cutlass, but you have no shield against a liar's tongue.
If someone attacks you with a sword, you can see the blade coming. You can raise a shield, you can parry, you can run away.
The threat is physical and localized.
But a lie. It moves through whispers. It travels across the city before you even know it exists.
You do not know who started it, where it was born, or how far it has spread.
It is entirely elusive. Spurgeon compares it to the plague of flies in Egypt.
Baffling opposition. You swat one away, and 3 more take its place.
It touches the most tender points of human dignity. It cuts to the quick, and it leaves a venom behind that is nearly impossible to extract.
If someone steals your property, you can replace it. Someone injures your body, well, It can heal.
But your reputation, once shattered by deceit, requires an almost impossible effort to rebuild, because the damage exists entirely in the minds of other people.
And I am struck by the phrasing, lying lips. Lips are naturally soft, right? They're designed for speech and affection.
But here they are described as being as murderous as razors. They suck away the life of a character.
Spurgeon had another analogy here that really illustrates the frustration of trying to fight back.
The cuddle.
Yes. He says the liar surrounds himself with an inky blackness like a cuttlefish, or emits a foul odor like a skunk. Honest people simply do not want to get close enough to fight back.
The cuttlefish analogy is brilliant. When a cuttlefish is threatened, it shoots out a cloud of ink, obscuring the water so the predator cannot see it.
The deceiver does the exact same thing.
When confronted with the truth, they do not argue facts, they shoot out a cloud of confusion.
They introduce irrelevant details, they project their own flaws onto you, they muddy the waters until the truth is entirely obscured.
If you try to argue with a liar, you just get covered in their ink.
And the skunk analogy hits even harder, honestly.
Right. If you try to wrestle a skunk, you are going to walk away smelling terrible, even if you win the fight.
The bystander watching the fight does not know who started it. They just know that both of you smell awful.
Getting into a public mudslinging contest with a slanderer degrades your own character.
The text makes a crucial distinction here that we must analyze, though. The psalmist prays for deliverance from lying lips and from a deceitful tongue.
Those are not identical concepts.
No, they are not. The commentators categorize deceit as something far worse than downright falsehood.
I need you to explain the mechanics of that. How is deceit structurally worse than a straight-up lie?
Well, think about it.
A lie feels like the ultimate violation of truth.
A lie is a direct contradiction of the truth. It is blatant. If I say the sky is green, well, I am lying. It's easy to disprove.
Right, it is obvious.
But deceit involves a psychological manipulation of trust. Deceit incorporates fawning and flattery.
Ah, the fawning. That is the dangerous part.
The deceiver smiles to your face. They offer compliments. They pretend to be an ally while harboring violent enmity in their heart. They weaponize your own ego against you.
They make you complicit in your own downfall because you want to believe the nice things they are saying about you.
Precisely. They gain access to your inner circle through flattery. They gather intelligence and then use that intelligence to destroy you behind your back.
Yeah, that is just sinister.
Edward Rayner, a Puritan scholar, notes that an unbridled tongue is vehiculum diaboli, the chariot of the devil.
The chariot of the devil, that is an intense visual. It implies motion. It implies a targeted assault.
Rayner points out that the devil does not need to possess someone physically to cause chaos. He simply needs to drive their tongue.
So true.
And he notes that the destructive path of the tongue follows a specific progression. It starts with foolishness, proceeds to bitterness, and ends in madness.
Let us trace the psychology of gossip through those three stages. It often starts as foolishness, right? An unguarded, idle comment.
Yeah, a casual observation about someone's life that was not yours to share.
It lacks malice at this stage. It just lacks wisdom.
But it rarely stays as foolishness.
Rarely. It ferments into bitterness. This is where motive is assigned.
You do not just observe someone's action. You begin to assume the worst possible intention behind that action.
You start adding a cynical spin to the narrative.
And finally, it results in madness.
Madness.
Madness is the obsession with the victim's destruction. The slanderer becomes entirely consumed with tearing the other person down.
To the point where they will sacrifice their own integrity, their own relationships, and their own standing just to see the target ruined.
Doeg the Edomite is the picture of this madness.
And what is the theological posture of the victim in all of this? When someone launches the devil's chariot at you, the natural human reaction is to form a defense committee.
You want to hire a PR firm, get on social media, and blast out your side of the story.
You want to gather everyone together and present your evidence. But the biblical response outlined here is radically different. In my distress, I cried unto the Lord.
Notice the verb tense there. I cried, and he heard me.
The verbs are past tense, but they apply to the present reality.
Right. The psalmist is drawing encouragement from past deliverance. It is a recognition that appealing to the honor of slanderers is useless because they have no honor.
Pleading with them is like pleading with panthers and wolves.
If you cry out to society, you might get sympathy, but you won't get justice.
When cries to man would only highlight your weakness, cries to God establish your strength.
You're right on.
So what does this all mean? We have established the absolute devastation of the deceitful tongue. It is a crime that human justice systems struggle to handle.
You cannot arrest someone for rolling their eyes, planting a seed of doubt, and starting a rumor that ruins your career.
Right. The wounds are invisible to the court. So how does divine justice handle such an untouchable crime? What happens to the person driving the devil's chariot?
We find the answer to that in verses 3 and 4. The psalmist asks an open question. What shall be given unto thee? Or what shall be done unto thee, thou false tongue?
What is the expected reward for slander?
Joseph Carroll, another commentator, points out the tragic irony of gossip. He notes that the tongue speaks without a fee, yet gets no profit, only danger and damage.
If you think about the motives for most crimes, there is a tangible payoff. People commit robbery to get money.
They commit assault to get revenge.
They commit fraud to secure property. But what do you get from gossiping? Nothing tangible.
You do not get a paycheck for destroying someone's reputation.
You gain absolutely nothing of substance, but you incur massive debt in the court of divine justice.
You are working for free, but the penalty is exorbitant. The punishment allotted by God is described in verse 4. Sharp arrows of the mighty with coals of juniper.
Sharp arrows and coals of juniper. This is where the imagery gets incredibly specific, and we need to break down the mechanics of both.
Let's look at the arrows first.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Anne McMichael introduces a concept here called the law of correspondence. This is a recurring theme in biblical justice, where the punishment mirrors the sin.
Retributive justice in the Reformed tradition often highlights this symmetry.
The wicked bend their tongue like a bow to shoot, lies in secret. They aim at the innocent from the shadows.
Therefore, God's justice comes as sharp arrows from the arm of omnipotence.
There is a contrast in the quality of the weapons here. The slanderer shoots a blunt, clumsy lie from the shadows. It might do damage, but it is a chaotic weapon.
God, however, shoots a perfectly sharpened arrow of truth. And he does not shoot it from the shadows. He shoots it from the throne of justice directly into the light.
The arrow of the Almighty does not miss. It pierces the conscience, it exposes the deceit, and it brings the hidden malice into the blinding light of divine judgment.
And then we have the second half of the punishment, the coals of juniper.
The book of James describes the tongue as a fire, a world of iniquity that sets on fire the course of nature. So, according to the law of correspondence, the punishment involves fire.
I love the botanical and historical references the commentators bring out here regarding the juniper. Why specifically juniper coals?
Well, the word translated as juniper actually refers to the white broom shrub. It is known scientifically as Genista ratum.
And it grows abundantly in the desert regions of the Middle East.
Right. 19th century travelers like Johann Ludwig Burckhardt and John Wilson observed Bedouins making charcoal from the thick roots of this specific shrub for the Cairo market.
They did not use the branches, right? They dug up the massive, dense roots.
Because the roots possess a specific thermal property.
Yes. The fire of the broom root burns fiercely and stubbornly under its own ashes. It retains heat for an incredibly long time.
There is a striking midrash story provided by H.T. Armfield that perfectly illustrates the terror of these coals.
I read this in the notes, and the visual is haunting.
Walk us through it.
So, two men are walking in the desert, and they sit down under a juniper tree. They gather sticks and roots from the tree and cook their food over the fire.
After they eat, they pack up and leave.
Right. And a full 12 months later, they pass over the exact same spot in the desert. They see the dust of what they had burned the year before.
Remarking that it has been a whole year, they walk fearlessly upon the dust.
And their feet are severely burned by the coals, which were still glowing white-hot beneath the surface.
A fire that burns under the sand for a year. It is a terrifying image. The surface looks like harmless coal ash, but beneath the surface, the fire is still raging.
Let me push back on the application of this, though.
Okay, what are you thinking?
Is this just a metaphor for a guilty conscience? Like, you tell a lie, people move on, the dust settles, but the guilt burns inside you for a long time? Or is this pointing to something far heavier?
Oh, it points to something infinitely heavier. Within the framework of biblical theology, this signifies inextinguishable divine justice.
Slander creates a long-lasting fire of ruin in the life of the victim, but God's righteous judgment outlasts it.
The coals of human malice will eventually cool. The gossip will eventually fade from the public memory. But the fire of God's justice does not cool.
This is not a guilty conscience. This is a theological statement about the terrifying reality of facing the sovereign judge when you have spent your life destroying his people.
It is a portrait of eternal retribution.
I want to pause here and ask you, the listener, to evaluate your own response to injury. When someone wrongs us, our immediate instinct is to seek personal revenge.
We want to shoot our own arrows. We want to light our own fires.
But if God's justice is this precise, this enduring, and this absolute, it dictates how we handle being slandered.
Are you trusting in God's vindication, or are you secretly gathering your own juniper coals to strike back?
If we truly believe in the sharp arrows of the mighty, we can afford to put down our weapons. We can let God be the executioner of justice.
Putting down our weapons is incredibly difficult, especially when the environment around us remains constantly hostile.
Knowing that God will handle the wicked in the end does not magically remove the pain of the present moment.
While the believer waits for those juniper coals to consume the deceitful tongue, they still have to wake up every morning and live next door to the slanderer.
And that psychological exile is what we see next in verses 5 and 6.
The psalmist shifts from contemplating the judgment of the wicked to lamenting his current living situation.
Woe is me that I sojourn in Mesech, that I dwell in the tents of Kedar.
Now, when you review the sources, there is an interesting detail here.
Yeah, I looked at a historical map and I noticed a geographic impossibility here. Mesech was a region in the far north, up near the Caspian Sea. The people there were descendants of Japheth.
Right. And Kedar was a region in the far south, down in the Arabian wilderness. The people there were nomadic descendants of Ishmael.
How could the psalmist possibly dwell in both places at the same time? You cannot live in northern Russia and southern Arabia simultaneously.
What's fascinating here is that the connection is entirely moral, not geographic.
Moral. Okay, elaborate on that.
Mesech and Kedar represent fierce, warlike barbarian tribes. Their hands were against every man, and every man's hand was against them.
They were known for their hostility, their cruelty, and their absolute rejection of peace.
Calling your neighbors Mesech and Kedar was the ancient equivalent of calling rude, combative people Tartars or Vandals.
So he is not giving us his literal mailing address. He is giving us his psychological address. He is describing the climate of his community.
Precisely. John Calvin offers a piercing perspective on this. Calvin argues that this represents the anguish of a believer living among false brethren.
He calls them a bastard race who mock true piety.
The unique agony here is feeling like an alien in your own home. The psalmist is not a captive in a foreign country. He is surrounded by his own countrymen, perhaps even his own religious community.
Yet he feels entirely estranged from them because of their hostility toward the truth.
The text says, "My soul hath long dwelt with him that hateth peace."
We have to talk about the sheer exhaustion of that phrase, long dwelt. The fatigue of being around combative people is universally relatable.
We all know people who just want to fight. If you agree with them, they will change their position just to have an argument.
The modern analogy that comes to mind is being forced to live your entire life inside a chaotic, constantly arguing social media comment section.
That is a terrible thought.
There is no rest. Every interaction is a battle. Every word is scrutinized for weakness.
The mental toll of that constant vigilance is devastating. And if we look at this through the lens of David's life, the contrast is stark.
David went from the quietude of the sheepfold, just him, the sheep, and the silent stars, to the absolute tumult of the royal court and the battlefield.
He was surrounded by men like Joab and the sons of Zeruiah, who are hot-blooded, violent men.
David longed to lay aside the heavy scepter of the king and resume the simple shepherd's crook. He was a man of war by necessity, but his heart longed for peace.
Which brings us to the final verse of the psalm. Verse 7 reads, "I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war."
But the literal translation of the Hebrew is even more striking than the English rendering. It simply says, "I am peace."
I am peace. Not just desiring peace, not just advocating for peace, but embodying it.
The very nature of the individual is oriented toward shalom, wholeness, harmony, and reconciliation.
The believer does not just want a cessation of hostilities. They want true, flourishing peace.
That the tragedy follows immediately. But when I speak, they are for war. His kindest words provoke them.
If he is silent, they think he is plotting. If he opens his mouth to offer an olive branch, they snap it and use it as a spear.
They find a reason to attack his very existence.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see that David's experience here is a shadow of a much greater reality.
We often look at David as a type, a historical forerunner, pointing directly to Christ.
Samuel Iles Pierce, a theological commentator, points out that Jesus was the ultimate Prince of Peace. He came bringing the gospel of peace.
He embodied perfect shalom, yet the religious establishment of his day absolutely abhorred him.
Matthew Henry's commentary captures this dynamic perfectly. He notes that Christ spoke reason, love, and grace, but his enemies cried to arms and stoned him.
He offered them living water, and they demanded his blood. He healed their sick, and they accused him of working by the prince of demons.
This is the ultimate fulfillment of I am peace. But when I speak, they are for war. The Pharisees and the Sadducees were the ultimate manifestation of Mesech and Kedar.
But I want to ask a challenging question here, applying this to you, the listener, today. If embodying peace only provokes the world to war, what is the incentive for the believer to remain peaceful?
That is the hard part, isn't it?
If someone is coming at you with a sword and your peaceful response only makes them swing harder, why not fight fire with fire? Why not pick up the cutlass?
Why let yourself be a punching bag for a deceitful tongue?
Right. It is the most natural question in the world. The flesh demands retaliation.
The answer lies in the theological framework established throughout the entire text, resting heavily on the sovereignty of God. We do not retaliate because vindication belongs entirely to the sovereign.
The mandate for the believer, echoed later by the Apostle Paul in Romans, is not to be overcome of evil, but to overcome evil with good.
Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. The hostility of the world is a given, it is expected. But the believer's posture of peace is secured by their reliance on God's hearing ear.
Because God heard the cry in verse 1, the believer can remain peaceful in verse 7. The peace is not a strategy to win over the enemy.
No, it is an act of submission to the judge.
Spot on. The peace is not dependent on the circumstances or the behavior of the neighbors. The peace is anchored in the fact that the sovereign judge has recorded the truth.
The arrows of the mighty are already drawn on the bow. The coals of juniper are already prepared.
The believer does not need to manufacture justice. They simply need to rest in the character of God. The cross of Christ illustrates this perfectly.
He did not call down legions of angels to destroy his slanderers. He entrusted himself to him who judges justly.
We have covered massive ground today. We started by looking at the silent agony of the devil's chariot. How slander, deceit, and flattery act as invisible, devastating weapons that ruin communities.
We explored the terrifying reality of divine justice, picturing those juniper coals that burn hot and long beneath the surface, waiting for the wicked.
We examined the psychological exile of living among people who hate peace. And we finished by examining the believer's radical stance as an embodiment of peace amidst a culture of relentless hostility, pointing entirely to Christ.
It is a lot to digest.
It really is. I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to ponder as you go about your day, building on what we just discussed. We talked about the terrifying punishment for the slanderer, the inextinguishable fire of divine justice.
Yes, the juniper coals.
But consider the flip side. If the ultimate penalty for deceit is an eternal, unquenchable fire of ruin, what is the ultimate reward for the one who embodies peace?
The text leaves that unsaid, perhaps because the reward isn't a cleared reputation or a public apology.
The reward for saying I am peace in a world of war is an unbroken, eternal communion with the God of peace himself. Are you willing to forfeit your own vengeance to secure that communion?
That is the question we all have to answer.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Keep reading, keep thinking, and keep returning to the text. We will see you next time.
Until then, rest in the justice of the sovereign.